the year. And tonight we are quite thankful and grateful to have Megumi coming all the way from Melbourne. Megumi is the founder of Quietly Powerful. She is an author, speaker, and facilitator on leadership, culture, diversity, and inclusion. Megumi has worked in and consulted for large organizations such as NAB, Australian Super, ANZ, Accenture, Roche, state and federal organizations, and small not-for-profit and for-profit organizations for the last 20 years. While she focuses on leadership development and culture change, she also has a background in strategy and economics. Being an Australian born to Japanese parents, Megumi is quietly spoken and introverted. Megumi worked hard on overcoming what seems like a disadvantage, but came to realize that the fake it till you make it approach is not sustainable and fulfilling. She launched Quietly Powerful in 2016 and shares hers and others' successes, challenges, and learnings from working on becoming quietly powerful. In her recently released book, Quietly Powerful, How Your Quiet Nature is Your Leadership Strength, she describes how quiet professionals and those outside of majority groups can fulfill their leadership potential and challenge our beliefs about what good leadership looks, sounds, and feels like. Her book will be available after tonight's talk, and without further ado, please join me welcoming Megumi Miki.
Well done on reading that tiny writing on the phone. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Megumi Miki, and I'm sure you can tell it is Japanese. Anyway, I have a problem with microphones like this, so I'm just warning you now, if I go like this and move my hands, just let me know to bring my microphone back, because I know I'm quietly spoken as well, so that'll be a challenge. Anyway, so how many of you are here because you are naturally quiet? Hands up. Okay. Of those people, how many of you are naturally quiet but pretend not to be? Hands up. Okay. And of those people, how many of you are quiet and pretend not to be and are exhausted? Okay. Awesome. So that's definitely where I was as I was going through my career. I need to get my clicker. So I wanted to share with you my own story, but also what I've researched over the last 3 years with some real quietly powerful leaders who I've interviewed and discovered. And you'll see that some of their quieter natures and quieter attributes can be a real hidden leadership strength. So that's what I wanted to share with you. But I just want to start off with, do you all have your phones or some kind of device with you? I would love for you to bring those out. So I would like to ask you a question. Actually, I may not go to Menti because I don't know if I've set it up. I don't think I've set up Menti, have I? Don't worry. Let's not worry about the Menti thing. So when somebody says to you, oh, she's a little bit quiet, what words come to mind first to you? Just pull them out as you think of them. Shy. Shy? Was it? Yep. What else? Scared? Okay. I haven't heard that one before. Others? Ashamed? Ooh, I haven't heard that one either. Insecure? What else? Introvert? Wallflower. Okay. Anything else? Reserved. Not confident. What else? So they all tend to be the wallflower type of descriptions, aren't they? Which is interesting because they're definitely not powerful. Have any of you, though, been with somebody who's quiet, but then, so they don't say a lot, but when they do, they say something really powerful and you just sit up and go, wow. How many of you have seen that happen? Okay, quite a few. So can you see that quiet can be powerful? We just don't notice it quite as much because they're not in your face. So a lot of us tend to not think of quiet as powerful and disempower ourselves as a result. Which is why I wanted to really flip this on its head and say, well, actually quiet can be powerful if you can access that consciously. And that's what's been my work for the last 3 years. So why quietly powerful? So that's me when I was 5. Yes, I was very quiet and cute. This is kindergarten in Japan, and so I grew up both in Japan and Australia, but I lived in Japan for about 10 years all up. And as a 5-year-old going to kindergarten, I was very quiet. Are any of you Japanese in the room? Or do you know Japanese language? Okay. Do you know the word otanashi? What does it mean?
Quiet,
Settle down and quiet. What other meanings are there? Sorry? Obedient. There's a bit of that too, yeah. So mild and meek, if you look it up on the dictionary, it says mild and meek, and it's about being quiet. But if you actually look at the word, direct translation of the word, otona means adult, chi means like. So adult-like, meaning mature. So I never really thought of it as a bad thing as a child. So I just grew up being quiet. My mother used to talk on my behalf, and that was easy for me. It was good. You know, somebody asked a question, and I'd just sit back, and my mum would talk. That was fine. And also, as I was growing up, I moved around a lot. I went to 8 different schools as a child up until before going to university. And as a result, in different countries as well, so I've been to schools in Sydney actually as well, Adelaide and not Melbourne, Canada and Japan as well, so all over the place. And so whenever moving schools, what I found myself doing was trying to fit in, as any child would, and the way in which I did that was to stay quiet and hidden. And it was a survival mechanism for me. I still got picked on, by the way, because when you go to a different country, you look different, and etc. But that was my survival mechanism. But it worked to a large degree. Unfortunately, though, as I went into work, it didn't work for me. And my earlier career was in management consulting. Any of you management consultants in the room? Review. If you can think of management consulting in strategy and in speaking to senior managers, there was an expectation that you walk in with a confident look, and so I had to put on my heels. I don't wear heels anymore, if you haven't noticed. I had to put on the heels, put on a proper suit, and look like I knew what I was doing. God, I exhausted myself totally, and I actually burnt out after about 6 years. Then I moved into ANZ and started in finance, but I was really fortunate to work in a field called Breakout and Cultural Transformation of ANZ. If any of you are old enough, in the 2000s, it was a major cultural change program that ANZ Bank was doing. Anyway, so I jumped into that because I loved the concept, I loved the idea, but then it required me to stand up in front of groups like this all the time. And as a quieter person, how exhausting again. But the thing that was different there though was that I was, see I told you I'm not used to microphones like this. The difference was that I loved the content. I loved it, I really wanted to, and I found that I was making a difference to individuals and teams and organisations, and I just wanted to do it well. But unfortunately, I did not find a role model I could follow who had a quieter style like myself. And unfortunately, every time we did training, people, the teachers and my colleague would say, oh, bring more energy. And I'd try. And then as soon as I tried, they say, oh no, but you have to be yourself. And I got so confused. Well, I didn't know how to bring my quiet energy into the room, and it was just really confusing to be myself. So anyway, so that was my journey in that stage. But then over time, I've been talking in front of groups for many years now, and I got quite comfortable with it. But then more recently, this was 2018, I got a call from, or I got a LinkedIn message actually from quite a senior person from the Department of Premier and Cabinet who organised this event called the Empowering Women for the Future Summit, which is for the Victorian State Government, and they have 1,200 people attend these things. And she was asking me to talk in front of 1,200 people. And you can imagine, my mind was going, oh wow, that's exciting because I can share this message. But on the other side, my voice is going, oh my God, how am I going to do this? So I've constantly had this voice going on between, I can do this, and then the other side of this is so scary. But the thing that really flipped me was a time when I was co-facilitating with a colleague who I've worked with a fair bit. He's like the opposite of me. So he is the most gregarious, the most outrageous, the most loud person you could have as a facilitator. So we co-facilitated, and he kicked off first, and he started off, and he had the group laughing within the first 2 minutes. And I'm sitting to the side waiting for my turn, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not like that. And do you know that you've got these little inner voices or inner critics in your head? Have you noticed those? And they can go loud, really loud after a little while. So that day, even though I've been facilitating for quite some time, it got so loud, it was saying to me, oh, you're so boring, and you don't engage people like he does, and all of these criticisms were going wild. Then I got up and did my part. It was fine. But interestingly, somebody I knew quite well came over to me after, during the break, and she said to me, Megumi, what's going on? You're not quite yourself, your best self today. And she caught me out. I just said, because I knew this person pretty well, I said, my colleague is so different to me, and I just had these voices in my head going, I'm going to disengage everybody, I'm going to be boring, and things like that. And she looked me in the eye and said, Megumi, don't be silly. The fact that you two are so different is what is valuable. So that you two as a team make a brilliant team, so don't you put yourself down like that. And that was like a wake-up call for me to say, okay, I need to learn how I can bring more of my quieter energy and quieter approach to whatever I do in terms of speaking, but also all the work that I do. And I've been discovering over time how I can bring that into the work and experimenting, and even in public speaking as well. I got feedback one day saying, I was facilitating actually a group of about 40 people, and the feedback I got from this CEO who invited me to do this work, afterwards he said, Megumi, you were fantastic. It was like you were invisible. I go, oh my God, what did I do? It's like I did nothing. But he said, because you were there, but it was like you weren't there so that the group did the work. He said it empowered the group, it allowed the group to do the work rather than you being the centre of attention. It was brilliant. That was the feedback. So more and more I'm trying to work out what I can bring that's different. Us being quieter is that there are unconscious and default assumptions that we carry around in our minds and societally as well. For example, speaking equals contribution. If you don't speak, you're not contributing. Have you noticed how that's an assumption? Even though you're listening really intently and you're thinking and you might add something later on or even after the meeting, that's not seen as contribution. Being outspoken equals confident and competent, which is that necessarily true? How many of you have seen people who are outspoken and talk forever and they're just talking rubbish? Okay? So it's not always true. It's not always the case. Of course, some people have a lot of substance and being outspoken too. But also the other one is the confidence thing. I have spoken to so many people who are quite outspoken and they say to me, I may look confident, but I'm not. I have my doubts. And so I even had a director of HR at a very large organisation who's very extroverted and outspoken say that to me. And I wrote about that. Another one is appearing confident equals confident and is leader-like. Have you ever had somebody who appears to be confident and you give them feedback and they get really defensive and reactive? What does that tell you about their level of confidence? Not that necessarily high. Yeah? So that would be a signal to say that somebody who's appearing confident perhaps is not really confident on the inside. On the other hand, people who are quieter, or people who are outspoken, people who seek out feedback and they welcome feedback, they tend to be a bit more sure of themselves. They can welcome the criticism and the feedback. So that's one. And then also appearing confident, being leader-like. It's a default assumption, but it's also a psychological bias or a cognitive bias that we have. Through my research, I found out that there's such a thing as the awestruck effect. Scary. So you see somebody who is very outspoken and charismatic in a sort of quite a big energy kind of way, and we get sucked in. We don't think rationally when we're awestruck. Have you ever noticed that happen sometimes? Have you noticed that happen in the US perhaps? A bit? So it happens. So that is a psychological thing that can happen. And then confidence equals competence also happens as well, which is not necessarily the case. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? Some of you? It's another psychological thing that happens. Those people who are overconfident can be at the beginnings of their confidence. They don't know what they don't know, therefore they're confident, if that makes sense. So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm sure you've seen that too. Okay? And the result of all of these default assumptions is that what happens is that people often, particularly if you're quiet, you get this feedback. You need to be more confident. Who's ever been told that feedback before? Anyone in the room? Okay, quite a few of you. Of those people who put their hands up, when you got told to be more confident, did you feel more confident as a result? Why do people give that feedback then? Every time I do this talk now, I tell people, please don't give that feedback to other people because it's not helpful, because unfortunately it actually goes the other way around. When I've been told to be more confident, I start to go, oh my God, so I must not look confident, and so I start to doubt myself and my inner critic goes wild. Can you see how it has a reverse effect almost? You need to speak up more. Again, has a reverse effect I've found particularly for quieter people, because every time we go into a meeting after being told that feedback, you keep thinking, oh, I need to speak up. And so you get anxious, I need to speak up, I need to speak up. And that anxiety actually causes us to not think properly and that causes us to not be able to speak up. So it actually has a reverse effect. You're too quiet, same sort of thing. You need to believe in yourself. A lot of women get told that through the whole gender diversity field and articles and all these. Again, it has the reverse effect in my view. It's quite different. How you build confidence is quite different to being told to be more confident, because they're well-meaning but very unhelpful feedback. Because what happens is we start to go into our inner critics. I need to speak up more. What would they think if I said that? I'm not adding anything. They won't listen even if I speak. And so we actually get anxious and frustrated and disheartened, such that we speak up less, or we show up less confident in some ways. So the problem with all of this is that we start to feel like there's something wrong with us because of this feedback, because of this social conditioning, if you like, that belief that quiet doesn't equal confident, quiet equals wallflower, all the things that you said. So being quite naturally quieter, we start to doubt ourselves, going, there must be something wrong. I even had a woman who came to one of my very early breakfasts, who was a mum of 2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy was very extroverted, very popular, had lots and lots of friends, and very sporty, the typical Aussie guy that gets along with everybody, that kind of boy. And the girl was the quieter girl girl that likes books, and she had a bunch of close friends, but not too many. And this mum, when she came to the breakfast, said to me, Megumi, I've got this daughter, and she's quieter, the brother is a lot louder. And she came to me one day and said, what's wrong with me, Mum? I'm not like my brother. That's just so sad, and she's like 12, 13 years old. So that can happen. And that is one of the reasons why I feel like I need to talk about this a lot more. Because there's another psychological phenomenon that happens called internalized marginalization, where we internalize the marginalizing voices that are on the outside. So being told you're too quiet and things gets internalized makes us feel like we're less than. And unfortunately what that does is most of us die with our music still locked up inside. And we all have unique music to contribute to the world, and we just don't. So I'll just pause at this point. If you could have a quick chat. Does this resonate? Is this different? Have you noticed this? What's it like for you? Just a quick chat with your neighbours, please, for 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. So just a quick straw poll. Yes, I've seen this, I've experienced this, it makes sense, it resonates. How many of you? Okay. So if you've experienced it, you'll know what it's like for other people too. But what I wanted to highlight though, and I talk about this in the book, this is not just about introversion. So those of you who are introverts may have come across the book Quiet by Susan Cain. So that's been, Susan Cain certainly made introversion somewhat popular in the world so that we understand introversion a little bit better. But if I think about myself, why I can go quiet and hidden, there are many other reasons. So introversion is definitely one part. But I'm definitely on the introvert side, but I'm not that far into the introvert side if I look at my some of the tests that I've done. But the other side of it is your cultural background has something to play. Yeah. So, for example, being a Japanese person, speaking up against authority is a big no-no. So I wouldn't speak up if there's somebody senior in the room, for example. There's also your conditioning as your upbringing. So when I was speaking about my Japanese background, somebody said, oh, it's not just Asians, you know, it's Catholics as well. I had somebody say, well, in a Catholic school, they were brought up to be, and this is a woman, in a Catholic school, girls were taught to be seen, not heard, to be a good girl. So you're not supposed to speak up and stand out. It's a no-no. So that was an upbringing. There's also other reasons like power dynamics. So in the context of if it was a very white, male-dominated environment and I walk in, I feel somewhat intimidated because I am definitely the minority. I've been through that many, many times. It takes more energy for me to speak than a white man in that room. Can you see that? So it takes more energy, and of course you can, but recognize that when you're in the minority, the power dynamics is such that it is harder, so it takes a little bit more energy. So for women, of course, if you're in a male-dominated environment, if you're the only woman, then of course that makes it hard. If I think about it, there's multiple dimensions here, and for me, I can tick probably 4 or 5 boxes. So I can definitely say that I've had my own challenges. So I want to flip this to say, well, actually, a quieter approach has some real benefit in the leadership context, but in many other contexts as well. So here are some leadership skills and behaviours that I find a quieter approach can help really, can be really helpful. So building relationships. A quieter approach, the ones that listens more than speaks, can help to build deeper connections and can be a more in-depth conversation than just a chit-chat, if you like. I'm not saying being a loud person necessarily is a bad thing at all. It can bring a lot of energy, but I'm just balancing it out saying, well, you can bring a lot of energy, but you can also bring a lot of depth and quiet listening to conversations. And that builds a lot of great relationships. Probably more long-lasting relationships is what I found from some of my quietly powerful leaders. Problem solving. Okay, problem solving can be done speaking out loud, but problem solving, deep problem solving, often it has been done through deep thinking, reflection, and in solitude. I just recently watched Bill Gates' documentary. Have any of you watched that? He takes a week of quiet in some kind of shack over in the country. Each year he will take a week off just to go and think and solve problems. And that's what he does. So that's an example of that. Influencing. I think we often think of influencers as being the outspoken, persuasive speakers. What I found through my research, some of the people that do quiet influencing is that they don't necessarily try and do it as a group to influence, but they'll speak to people individually or in smaller groups, listen to them, understand their approach before trying to work out what works amongst all. So it's a quieter approach to influencing that helps. Very much a collaborative and an approach that can help. Selling is another one often we think of as, you need to have the gift of the gab to be able to sell. There's actually a book called Introvert Advantage, I think it's called, which is about selling as a quieter person, and there's some real benefits in that where you do more listening, you do more understanding, you try and help them to find the right solution, less of trying to push sell. I mean, how many of you like being push sold or push sold to you? Do you like it? Like, you need to buy this. No, I don't. So a quieter way of selling can be very, very powerful. Public speaking, as I shared with you, I got feedback about my speaking, and sometimes it can be, one of the feedbacks I've had around my public speaking is that I try and include everybody because I don't like being the centre of attention the whole time. So that's why I get you to chat amongst yourselves and ask you questions, and that's how I do my public speaking. And that I've been given feedback that can be quite inclusive, quite different to the entertainer centre of attention. Facilitating, as I mentioned, I've had feedback about being invisible can be very helpful. And coaching. Coaching is very much about the other rather than the person doing the coaching. So that quieter approach can be very helpful in many, many ways. These are all skills that leaders use, are they not? So these are really helpful. And then the final one is difficult conversations. Difficult conversations are difficult for anybody, but a quieter approach that some of my quietly powerful leaders share is that you do difficult conversations in a quieter approach by listening to them and not taking trying to persuade them type of approach, and that can really help. So examples of more famous quieter leaders, you can see Gandhi there, Angela Merkel, Warren Buffett's another quieter person who's been highly successful. Greta Thunberg's another introvert who has made a statement through action, less of the words, although she is speaking a lot more now, but initially it was very much about action. And Jacinda Ardern, I've no idea whether she's an introvert or not, but her approach has been very different to many of the world leaders that we see today, a more compassionate, more empathetic, and some would say softer approach. Jacinda Ardern actually said, being compassionate and empathetic doesn't make me less strong as a leader. So she does talk about that. So my research, direct research that I've done of quietly powerful leaders, some of you may recognise a face or two, definitely one, down the bottom, in the middle. Most of you should recognise your founder of Haymarket HQ, in the middle there. So he was one of my interviewees and 28 others. And some of them are CEOs, some of them are CFOs, some of them are CIOs, others are entrepreneurs. There's a Paralympian in there as well. Some very senior people in government. Some of them are, one is from the military as well, which I found fascinating because you have a stereotypical view of a military leader, don't you? But this Simon Harrington, that he was a rear admiral of the Australian Navy. He has a very different approach and take to leadership. So what I found from these leaders, I found some attributes that seem to be quite common across all of these people. One is that they're very, very comfortable in their own skin. They just seem to be okay with who they were, including their strengths as well as their weaknesses. So I'd ask them about their attributes or their strengths and weaknesses. They quite happily would speak about both their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, some of them would use self-deprecated humour. They'd just laugh about some of the things that they've stuffed up in the past, including one of them, Steve. I recorded all the interviews. It's on video, and we sat down. And the very first thing he said to me on video was, Megumi, this is really quite uncomfortable, you know. I don't normally speak into a camera about myself. And that was all recorded. So he's comfortable enough to share that he's uncomfortable. Does that make sense? So to me, that suggests that they're just okay with themselves. To me, that's real confidence, not the put on confidence, if you like. They're also, because they're comfortable, they're very present. Because they have a way of managing some of those inner critics, they can be present with people, you know, be there, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally and almost spiritually, be there with people. Have you ever had conversations with people where you felt like you were the only person in the room at that time? Have you ever had those sort of quite connected conversations? So that's the presence that they bring. They don't even have to speak then. Just their presence alone will create that connection. And as a result, and they listen a lot, and as a result, they build those relationships that really last. One of them, quite the couple leaders, was a partner at EY, and she said that she still keeps in touch with some of her mentors and mentorees 20, 30 years later. She still keeps in touch. It's that deep depth of relationship. So they're very present. And thirdly, the final thing I think really stands out for me about these quietly powerful leaders is that they're purposeful, in the sense that so many of them said, I never thought of myself as a leader when I spoke to them. And it was really when somebody saw something in them and they said, okay, maybe I can, but they stepped into leadership for a purpose, not for themselves. So that, and it makes sense. Because it makes sense to me, because I don't want to be the centre of attention. That's not my natural tendency. But the reason why I'm doing what I do now is because I feel like the world needs to change in some way, and also there's a lot of people who might benefit from this kind of idea. And that's the only reason why I'll step up and do these talks and stand in front of lots of people. If I had my way, and if I were my natural self, I'll be at home and reading a book or watching movies or whatever, or writing a book, and that's it. I won't go out and talk in front of people. So for leaders that are quite public as well, they stepped into their leadership roles because they felt that they had something to add, something to contribute, and they felt a lot of meaning behind what they do. So they're all very, very passionate leaders, I have to say. Not in a loud way, but in a very quietly powerful way. So that's certainly the quietly powerful leaders. And I think we need more of these leaders now, more than ever, for some reasons that I'll just share with you. One is that the world is becoming way complex, way disruptive, and so much change that there's more questions than answers, don't you think, in the world these days? So therefore, you cannot afford to have a heroic leader who knows everything. You can't have them, because it's not possible for one or a few people to know everything. Another reason why is with globalization and multicultural organizations, clients, partnerships, and everything else, you cannot have leaders who go into an environment with different types of people and go in as if they know everything. And you can't have people who don't listen and really try and understand first before they understood. So that quieter approach to developing that relationship and understanding is very, very powerful. because it allows you to harness the diverse talent, styles and perspectives. In fact, a lot of the quietly powerful leaders that I spoke to, they all talked about how often they would step back and allow the team to come up with ideas, solutions, and allow much more empowering than what I've seen other leaders do. And some of that comes out in some articles, Wall Street Journal. Funny. So one of the articles that I saw recently, I can't remember what year that was, but fairly recently, is that the best bosses are humble bosses, ones that don't self-promote so much, the ones that are not so much in your face. And I take that as, they do less talk, they actually get results. Listening, and space for more leaders to emerge, which is really what some of these quietly powerful leaders have done. And this is a very recent article in the Australian Financial Review. I'm so pleased to see it. I think it was yesterday. And that's the psychologist that's working with ASIC at the moment, and she's going around and sitting with boards of companies, making an assessment about board culture and organisational culture. Have you heard of that person? I can't remember the name. Elizabeth Zardon. So she said heroic leadership versus humble leadership. We need more humble leadership. Same thing as what I said, but one person cannot know everything. So the other thing that I'm a little concerned about is that power can corrupt, and that's been a lot of misuse of power in the world. I'm sure you can think of many, many examples. And there's quite a bit of research on power. This is one that's quite famous around the power paradox, where when we step into positions of power, that can start to distort our behaviours. We start to feel more entitled. We start to lose empathy for those who have less power, and therefore that leads to misuse of power. I'm sure you've seen that. Have you ever come across people who've gone into a senior role and all of a sudden they seem a bit more distant, or they seem a bit more arrogant in some way, or that happens. But it happens to some more often than not than others. An associate professor of marketing at Shooley School of Business, but she actually worked at Melbourne Business School, and I spoke to her on the phone because I saw a research of hers, and she said, well, power doesn't turn everybody into a destructive tyrant. It has a pernicious effect when it gets into the hands of those who want it most. In other words, those who crave power often gets poisoned by power because they're in it for themselves. And you see that over and over again. Power is like an amplifier. So this is Professor Adam Grant, one of my favourite authors. He talks about power is like an amplifier. Whoever we were before just gets louder. So if you were already somewhat self-centred or somewhat not as empathetic or whatever, that gets amplified, is his research. So interesting research, I think, which I'm not saying this is not necessarily about louder people are always like that. So some louder people are very altruistic and everything else, but I'm just highlighting there's some patterns here potentially that needs to be watched out for. You've seen all of these, Enron's, the Royal Commission, and I don't know what the leaders are like, but I do wonder. Tough leadership and humiliation. You see, and I keep hearing about workplace bullying, and it really concerns me that some of those things happen. And then there's also even worse cases of sexual abuse and misuse of power. All of these are misuse of power. So humility, I think, more so than quiet leadership even, to me is so critical. And so our beliefs around leadership, I believe, needs an update. Now, this is a military leader, and Simon Harrington, the Rear Admiral of the Australian Navy, flipped it on its head and said, actually, the military also needs and will benefit from a quieter leadership. In operation, when they're in charge and they have to direct people, yes, of course you have to do that. But before you get to that, there's a lot of planning and strategizing, where if you don't include everybody at all ranks, you get into lots of trouble, is what I'm saying. So, I guess question, what to do, but before I go into it, I'll just pause again. Your thoughts, again, chat to the people around you, and I might ask you a few questions after you have a quick chat. So, your thoughts, do you agree? Do you see that as a bit different? Any other opinions around this? That would be great. So, quick chat amongst yourselves. Thank you. Any reflections or comments? Different opinions? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, just in reflection of what you said earlier about, I suppose, feeling other people being in the room who are more confident. My reflection on that was that, generally speaking, a quiet person expresses their own voice and doubts themselves, whereas probably shouldn't.
So, great to hear that, because what I'm trying to distinguish is being quietly disempowered versus being quietly powerful. So you can be quiet and be quite different. If you feel like you're suppressing yourself, you've internalized that voice, then you're disempowered. But if you're quite okay being quiet and you'll speak when you need to, and you do say insightful things, then that's quite powerful. So that's a distinction there. Any other comments or thoughts?
Well, hi guys, my name is Lily Sue. I'm in a group with William and Wendy, and we were just reflecting on this updating leadership, and we made a kind of like, it was interesting what Wendy said, because right now leadership is all about this one shiny figure leading people to greatness and blah blah blah. But what Wendy said was that because everyone is like that, it makes it harder for people to gain respect as for introverted to, as a quiet leader, to gain respect. So that's something that I agree with. That's something I didn't realize. Everyone else is louder than you.
Some really practical things there that we can talk about in a moment.
Yes. So I had sort of similar observation in terms of the way corporate culture is sort of structured, like team days or brainstorming things. I can't stand those things.
Yeah,
it's like just like thought dump everything onto the paper, and it's kind of like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
And you kind of get, as an introvert or quiet, but you sort of get left behind in that. It's almost like there isn't any other mechanism for someone to contribute if they're not able to contribute in that form. Yeah.
So I work with Seek, Seek the organisation, and some leaders around how do you, and they're amazing actually in terms of their inclusive approach. And we talked about how do we get the best out of quieter people in a brainstorming context. And they already did. I was about to suggest it, and they said, oh, we already do that, which is amazing. They make sure that people have material beforehand. They also do, I can't remember the name of it, but they do individual reflection before going into brainstorming. So you actually combine both what works for people who like to talk it out and people who like to think. So there's actually ways. But organisations need to wake up to that fact, firstly, and you may be able to wake them up. But you can also request some things as well. And in terms of speaking up in groups, firstly, I think the first thing is think about people who don't say a lot, but when they do, they're very, very powerful. They make an impact. You don't have to, it's not quantity, it's quality. So if you can do that, and in order to do that, you have to feel really comfortable inside and be present, etc., then you can make an impact. So that's the how-to, I guess, where we wanted to go to just to finish up. So what to do? I guess collectively we do need to challenge the beliefs and systemic biases in how we determine good leadership. That's definitely a challenging one, but I'm trying to do this by doing all these talks and trying to talk to organisations and leaders. But certainly a hard one, because I think still the natural tendency is to look for the shiny ones, as you say. Individuals though, I think individually we can all work on becoming more quietly powerful, because people do start to notice, as I've discovered, that the more comfortable I got with myself and my quiet nature and just did what I did, the more people noticed. and I didn't really go out to do that, but it's just that people notice how I'm being more natural and authentic and just using some of my quieter strengths, if you like. So how do we do that? This is my, and this is in the book too, my framework for accessing your quiet power. So 2 things. One is to appreciate yourself fully. And I mean appreciate yourself fully, not just the bits that you like. Okay, it's easy to do that. So a lot of, there's a bit of a movement around strengths-based coaching and strengths-based work and all of that. And I like it to a degree, but I think it's incomplete. Because if you only like your strengths, what about your weaknesses? That's your source of inner critics. So to work on appreciating some of your weaknesses is what I work with people to. Adapting purposefully. How many of you have been told to go off and do some training courses like assertiveness training or presentation training and you just get told and you feel like you're just learning techniques and you're just putting it on. That was certainly the case for me with facilitation. I was just doing the techniques rather than actually owning it and doing it my way. That works for me. While as adapting purposefully is when I started to really connect with why I'm doing it in the first place. And that allowed me to really commit to doing the things that I was learning. And that makes a big difference. So if you did neither, you're in a place of shrinking because everybody else is growing and developing and so on. If you don't develop yourself and if you don't appreciate yourself fully, you are shrinking. Some of you or some of us can go into the place of appreciating ourselves fully and we're comfortable with ourselves, but we don't stretch ourselves. We just fall into the comfort zone. And people who say, oh, I'm not like that, it's just who I am, just take it or leave it. People who say things like that can fall into the limiting bucket because human beings are much more adaptable than that. The fact that 20 years ago when I started facilitating, I was shaking and nervous and all of that, and I'm quite comfortable now, is an example of you can absolutely learn and stretch and grow and do things that are outside your comfort zone. On the other hand, I also did a lot of faking for a while, where I was doing all this training and techniques, but I did not work on appreciating myself fully. And so as a result, I was just doing techniques, and that can come across as faking. Well, what you need to do is both. So that's really the game that I'm talking about, so that you can develop that sense of comfort in yourself, which allows you to be present, and that allows you to do things, become an instrument for some kind of mission or purpose that you're on, and that allows you to thrive. So, I might skip this one. Well, actually, I'll just do hands up. So, how many of you feel like you need to do more work on appreciating yourself fully? Hands up. How many of you feel like you need to adapt more purposely so you step outside your comfort zone, do things that are perhaps not as natural to you? How many of you feel like you need to do more of that? Okay. How many need to do both? Okay. How many of you are doing both well and you feel like you're doing great? Excellent, excellent work. All right. So I thought to leave you with a really practical thing. I'll just do this exercise that I do as part of my program. It's just one of many things that I do, which might give you a sense of appreciating yourself more fully. So, pick, how many of you can think of a weakness of yours, something that you don't like about yourself or you think is a weakness that's getting in your way? Just pick one. Yeah, just pick one. Just put it in your head. And what I'd like to ask you to do working with somebody next to you is find a way to describe that weakness in a neutral or positive way, in that it's something that's useful. I'll give you an example. So I've got many weaknesses, but one of them I would say is for a long time I thought my lack of vocabulary, because I grew up in different countries and I didn't do school in Australia for quite a chunk of time, so I thought my vocabulary is very limited. So I spoke and wrote poorly was my belief for a very long time, to the extent that when I first wrote my blog, I was so nervous about posting it. I was extremely nervous. I gave it to everybody else to read, rewrote it about 10 times. I then I copied and pasted it onto LinkedIn, and I spent 3 or 4 days looking at that publish button. And I couldn't press it. I was just so nervous because I thought that I didn't write very well. And I started publishing, and I eventually got to it, and I published, and I've written quite a few articles now, about 80 or 90 of them, and I've now gotten used to writing. And the feedback I've started to receive is that, Megumi, you write really clearly and simply, because I don't have the vocabulary. I don't know enough words to make it really difficult. So there's a reframe for you. Can you see that? So I thought it was a weakness, but actually it can be used as a strength. Another one is I used to, I still do, worry a lot about what other people think. How many of you fall into that category? A lot of people do. So one of my teachers in facilitation used to tell me a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Whatever other people think of you is none of your business unless you make it so." Really good quote. I love that quote. I've been working on it for 20 years. Okay, so it's hard work, but it's getting there gradually. Anyway, when I see that as a weakness, it really holds me back. I'm worrying about other people again. But then I thought about it for some time. And I thought, when I'm facilitating or when I'm doing the work that I do, it can be really useful. What do you think the usefulness of that is when I worry about what other people think? Sorry? More engaging because
you're actually like getting off the energy and
well, I'm thinking about what they're thinking. Yeah, so when I'm presenting or facilitating, I'm constantly looking, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Did you notice that I've been watching you? so I can use that as a strength to my work. So that's what I want you to do. Okay? So I guess when is this useful to use this quality? So you can talk to the same person or you can talk to somebody else if you like. Talk about one weakness that you can start to reframe and see some of the useful side of that. Off you go. 2 minutes. You're very loud for a supposedly quiet bunch. How many of you found a reframe to a weakness? Awesome. So, homework for you, those of you who didn't find one. Have a think about that because it's very empowering to see that what you thought was a weakness could potentially be useful to you. Yeah, that to me is part of appreciating yourself fully. So I encourage you to do that, and do keep on doing it more and more because you will see that weaknesses reframed can be a strength. A strength misused or overused can become a weakness. So don't hang on to your strengths and weaknesses so much. It can be both. Okay, so just wanted to finish up with what I'm doing. So the quietly powerful movement is very much those two sides, challenging the definition of good leadership and also developing quietly powerful leaders. And so what I do is I do these talks and organisations or conferences or wherever people want me to speak. And I am continuing to interview quietly powerful leaders. So if you know quietly powerful leaders that I can interview, I love that because I want to showcase them, to say they exist. They absolutely do exist. And by the way, those interviews are posted on my LinkedIn group, the Quietly Powerful LinkedIn group, so please feel free to join that. And then with organisations and recruiters too, to challenge their thinking and systems around this. And then the developing quietly powerful leaders, I do public programs. I do have a virtual program coming up in February. If any of you are interested, let me know and I can give you some information. It's a 16-week program that I do some coaching, but also lots of videos that allow people to reflect on things. And organisational programs as well. That's what I also try and do to see if I can play my part at shifting this whole dialogue around leadership and what it looks like. So if any of you want to follow up with, that's my second book that's just been released. There's a few there. So if you want to buy some, you can come and see me later on. But yeah, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and If you want to join the Quietly Powerful LinkedIn group, just do a request and I can join you up. And there's a lot of resources there that are connected to this topic. So, I want to finish off with saying to you, my wish is that you unlock the music you were born to play, not somebody else's music or somebody else expecting you to play. Just find your music and play that to contribute to the world. So, thank you very much.
Give a big round of applause to Miki Megumi once again. Now, as Megumi was going through that last exercise of identifying a weakness and rephrasing it as a strength, the first thing that came to my mind was that I have so many thoughts running through my head at any given time that I have trouble saying it clearly what I want to say. So here goes. PDF, who's here for the first time? We have a really great full house tonight, and I'm so glad that we have so many new faces here. And so especially for the new faces here, just a quick rundown of what we do. We do this every month. PDF is or Professional Development Forum is a community which aims to really inform, connect, and inspire young professionals and really build their leadership skills and build those stars of the future, unlock your leadership talent. We do this by having these talks every third Monday of the month here at Haymarket HQ, and they are always free. So we couldn't, and as for us, we really could not have had a better way to finish off this year than having an amazing speaker like Megumi here. So if you can please accept a very small token of our appreciation for your time with us and for giving us these insights. Thank you very much, Megumi.